One question has pounded in my skull over and over again. A debate I've been having. A thought I've been stuck on. Who would I be if this did not happen? Against my will, I have become the world's leading expert on one film. R.I.P.D. I have almost certainly seen it more times than anyone else on the planet, presumably aside from the production team that made it. 10 years after its release, I have seen the film upwards of 5 times, which is pretty crazy when you consider I've never seen these classic films. I don't know if I can convince you that R.I.P.D. is good, or even worth watching. You probably haven't seen it. If you have, you definitely haven't thought about it. Not like this. As such, it has become my civic duty, my curse, to provide the world with the definitive analysis of R.I.P.D. R.I.P.D. first fell into my life in 2013 when I was 14 years old. The trailer caught my eye as the kind of fun summer flick that would make for a pleasant afternoon at the movies, a place I was finding myself increasingly affectionate toward. By this point, movies like Journey to the Center of the Earth, The Avengers, and Oblivion had begun to form some semblance of an idea in my head that this medium was one I wanted to explore forever. When R.I.P.D. came along, I was at the perfect age, the perfect moment, for it to either come and go without a trace or become a permanent fixture in the Kevin canon. It probably would have come and gone too, until it became the first movie I ever liked that my parents flat out said to me they thought was bad. I bought the DVD the second I could. It stuck. Now, what even is R.I.P.D.? Well, have you seen Men in Black? It's that! We start our journey with Nick, a selfish, grating Ryan Reynoldsian Boston cop who, along with his partner Bobby Hayes, has just stolen some gold from a crime scene. Nick wants to make life better and easier for him and his nondescript wife character Julia. Unfortunately, the good in him is telling him he ought to turn it in and find happiness in the simple things. Hayes can't have this though and pumps Nick full of lead in the chaos of a police raid. And just like that, Nick is dead. And yet, as he ascends into the afterlife, he is yanked out of the judgment line and offered a job at R.I.P.D., the Rest in Peace Department, a supernatural police force that hunts down deados, those who have managed to remain on the earthly plane after their deaths, causing rot and havoc. Simply put, the R.I.P.D. would fuck up the Carnival of Souls. The couple from Beetlejuice? Eradicated. Joe Gardner from Soul would be horrifically executed in the street by an R.I.P.D. officer from the Civil War era. Not that one though. That's Roy.
I fought for the North.
Make no mistake, ACAB includes the R.I.P.D. Every dead cop offered a job at the R.I.P.D. takes it because they are on their way to hell if they don't. A major blockbuster from 2013 proudly declaring that all cops go to hell? Some might say it was ahead of its time. Anyways, partnered with the definitely not racist, don't even ask 1800s lawman Roy Cephas Pulsifer, Nick finds himself asking one question over and over again. Who would I be if my death had not happened? And more importantly, how can I use my newfound position to get back to who I was before? And who I was with? Nick is allowed to attend his own funeral services where he makes his first attempt to reconnect with Julia. Of course, the rules of the universe and the R.I.P.D. don't work like that, so all Julia can see is the face of cinema legend James fucking Hong speaking absolute gibberish. From here, Nick has no choice but to join Roy on his first mission as an agent of the R.I.P.D. There is a plot to attend to after all, and if there's one thing R.I.P.D. unfortunately makes sure of, it's putting that basic-ass plot first and foremost over any and all character beats. The job, and by extension the plot, is a distraction Nick must undergo as he figures out in the back of his mind how to get back to Julia. Meanwhile, Roy no longer has real human needs or desires. Everyone he once loved is dead, buried, and presumably residing in paradise, and his contract with the R.I.P.D. is so long he cannot see the end of it. Roy is simply enduring another day in the boring line of duty he has been subjected to for over 100 years. Everything from his reckless driving to his lack of respect for Nick to the carelessness he exhibits in the film's first Dedo interrogation shows how selfish and cold he is. This disinterest shines through when the Stedo turns out to have more of the gold Nick and Hayes stole, the gold that Nick was killed for. Roy doesn't give a shit about running a proper investigation or anything. To be fair, neither does Nick, who simply sees this as a potential path back to his old life. The investigation they half-assedly run takes them to Fenway Park, where Roy has a deado informant, Elliot. Elliot says,
"You cops are all the same. Always obsessing about how you bit it."
He knows this is just a selfish ploy for Nick to find a way back to being alive. He's seen it 1,000 times before. Hell, he's done it himself, if only to enjoy some baseball. Alone with the gold, Elliot passes it along to a familiar face, Hayes. For Roy, this is the first time in a century the job has had any intrigue. For Nick, this is another connection to his former life, another step on the road back home. Home, where Hayes goes next to see Julia. Here, Hayes digs up the rest of the gold that Nick buried in the backyard. Upon seeing this, Julia says,
"I don't even know who he was."
A crack appears in Nick's fundamental question. He wants to know who he would be if he had not died when and how he did. The irony is, before his death, Nick didn't seem to know who he was to begin with. Maybe he was as Julia sees him now. A liar. A bad husband. A bad man.
Gold's getting away.
Duty calls again. No character, only plot, remember? If we let these characters breathe, the movie will be good, and we cannot have that. This is a 90-minute action comedy that will come and go from theaters without a trace. There will be no 10-year later retrospectives analyzing this down the line. Now here, have a questionable action sequence starring Buzz from Home Alone as a monstrous and rotting deado who has burst into grotesque form. James Hong, legend though.
Okay, nothing to see. Gotta go!
Nick and Roy learn that the gold they have been chasing is the Staff of Jericho, a device which will reverse the flow of the portal of the afterlife and send billions of dead souls back to reclaim the earth. It also ensures this bad boy can have a big, splashy third act. But here the movie makes a rare good choice. Nick and Roy are benched from the mission and scheduled to be erased from the universe after their mistake revealed a deado to the citizens of Boston. They are free from the pressures of the plot, if only for a moment. They finally get to breathe as characters without the action getting in the way. With just one day left before his opportunity to reunite with Julia is gone forever, along with him and his soul, Nick goes to see Julia as she jogs at a local track. There is no more job in his way. There is only him. There is only her. She's afraid and alone and stuck in her grief. And yet here comes this strange man she does not know once again. Nick touches a hand to her face and she feels him for just a moment. A real moment of real comfort before the fear settles back in and she runs off. All Julia wants is for this to be Nick, for him to really be back. All Nick wants is to be back with her, without the barrier of this unrecognizable face. He's grieving for her as she's grieving for him, standing face to face yet worlds apart. Julia is asking the same question as Nick. Who would they be if this had not happened? Of all people, it's Roy's words that ring true. He says,
You're freaking her out if you haven't noticed. You're causing her pain. She needs to survive you.
It's here that Nick begins to realize that maybe he's been asking the wrong question. It doesn't matter who he would be if this did not happen. This happened. There's no going back. The only question that has to matter is who is he now, as things are, in this world, in this life after life. The R.I.P.D. is not an institution worth serving. God has no place in the R.I.P.D., it seems. There's no real promise that these people will get to go to heaven when this is all over. There's not even a promise that such a place exists. Nick and Roy are stuck in a careless purgatory. They can't sleep, they can't eat, they can't live, they can't move on. They are all function, no pleasure. The God of the R.I.P.D. is indifferent to the suffering of man. A God who frequently does nothing as countless souls skip their journey to the afterlife, necessitating the existence of the R.I.P.D. in the first place. It's deist at best, nihilistic at worst. Why is any of this worth it? This could be the final night Nick and Roy exist. This could be the final night the world exists. They are no longer beholden to the rules and regulations of R.I.P.D.'s soulless bureaucracy. Nick has exhausted all his chances at reconnecting with Julia. Roy never had anything to lose, but they both have something to gain. Doing what's right without the promise of any reward. Rising from their former selves and becoming something more. Becoming better men.
Gotta be the better man. Song's called Better Man.
Yeah, I got that.
Revved up and ready to go, Nick and Roy return to their plot duties, capturing the mastermind behind everything going on this whole movie. It's Hayes who, you guessed it, has been a deado this whole time. Wow! Hayes pulls the classic villain who intended to get caught gets caught maneuver and steals the last of the gold he needs from R.I.P.D. HQ. Anyway, it's time for the third act. Big bad open sky portal, hell on earth, horde of CG goons. You get it. And of course, Hayes kidnaps Julia so he can sacrifice her and so she can be part of the finale. Plot-wise, it's nothing special, nothing we haven't seen before. But, as we've been doing, I think things get interesting when you dig into the characters a little bit. What Hayes wants and what Nick wants are not so different. They both want to stay on Earth after their deaths, to continue life as it was, to be who they were before the tragedies that took their lives away unfolded. Hayes wants to take this a step further and give this gift to everyone. If he wanted to, he could remain on Earth as a normal deado forever. He does not need to partake in this plan. He even has a special St. Christopher's medal that prevents him from rotting like a normal deado would. He risks it all, but why? Because he assumes every single soul would want the same thing, to come back. All the people naturally experiencing death at the moment of the finale have no say in what is happening to them. But Hayes assumes that those people don't want to be dead. He's not even wrong. Nick definitely didn't want that. Nick has spent the whole movie stuck on the wrong question. So has Hayes. It cannot be who would I be if this did not happen. It must be who am I now and how can I be a better man. Nick knows this. Hayes does not. That is what sets them apart as hero and villain. Hayes' refusal to let go and attempt to move forward is why he loses the fight in the end.
Well, partner?
I have a new partner.
Before his defeat, Hayes stabs Julia, a killing blow. Her world goes still, the visual language mirroring the moments after Nick's death. For the first time since his death, Julia sees Nick as Nick. She can join him in the afterlife. They can be together. They can have everything they've wanted this whole time.
She needs to survive.
But that's not right. That's not who they need to be. They need to find out who they are in the world where this tragedy happened.
You gotta live your life without me.
Nick loves her, but he sets her free into a world where she can grieve him, yes, but survive him. She wakes up in the hospital, safe and alive, and alone, and ready to start the difficult journey to healing. R.I.P.D. Internal Affairs allows Nick and Roy to continue to exist. The faceless higher-ups continue to churn along, no more indifferent than before Nick and Roy saved the world. But Nick and Roy have changed. Roy is ready to accept Nick as a partner, and Nick is ready to serve, not as a means of earning a better judgment, but out of a sense that in doing so he may find a purpose and meaning he never had before. To find out who he is in his insane new world and become something more. He is no longer looking for a way back. He ends up fulfilling the lie he told in his initial R.I.P.D. interview.
I know what you're thinking. You got Rutch. You want your old life back. You want Julia.
No. You asked me to help you. And I'm here to help.
The R.I.P.D. as an institution may be a cold, uncaring, downright neglectful force in the universe, but Nick doesn't have to be. He doesn't save the world for them. He saves it for her, so she can live a normal life while she can, and maybe in time find her way back to him and join him in the light. If you haven't seen this movie, you probably think that this sounds incredible. If you have, you must be wondering how on earth I got all this out of that. I have seen this movie enough times to know every curve of it, every dent. I have been stuck thinking about this for a decade. I have watched this on a level that no one else has, and I have found something I truly think is worthwhile underneath. Laramie Legal wrote in their review of the film at the time that there is a legitimate film in here somewhere, buried deep beneath the rubble of its terrible script and editing. While my take here is the most generous reading possible, while the level of digging I had to do to uncover this was so intense it is nearly impossible to see, this is it. This is what R.I.P.D. is deep beneath all its faults. I don't even think R.I.P.D. is a bad film, to be completely honest. Maybe I just know it too well, but I kind of like it, even now. I think there's a lot of genuinely good filmmaking tucked in here. Ryan Reynolds and Jeff Bridges have great chemistry and are clearly having a blast. Director Robert Schwentke ain't Martin Scorsese, but I think there's a lot to like about the visual style of R.I.P.D. It was shot on location in Boston, and you can feel that. Most of the time it feels like the actors are in real places because they were. It's not some endless CG void. I think much of the lighting is very dynamic and interesting, and boy oh boy, Do I love the constant little zooms in this thing that add some pop to the action and help keep the geography of certain sequences clean and easy to follow? There's some real visual comedy here. Maybe I'm doing too much of the heavy lifting on R.I.P.D's behalf. Maybe I've just been stuck on it for too long. Maybe you'll watch the film and get none of this out of it. After all, you are the most important factor in what you get out of any given film. What you bring to a film changes how you and only you will see it. That's what makes film, what makes art subjective. I have been stuck on R.I.P.D. for the better part of 10 years. I've been stuck in a lot of ways lately. I don't recognize the world I'm living in anymore. I am stuck in a reality where a pandemic stole my graduation and the early part of my 20s. I am stuck with a college degree I have not used for anything of value in over 2 years. I am stuck in a place where I can barely hear myself think, where I constantly wonder who I would be if none of this happened. If I could think, if I could put my degree to good use, if there were no pandemic. And so again, I ask myself, who would I be if this did not happen? The tragedy is, I'll never know. None of us will. This is what happened. This is what's happening. We have to live with that. I have to live with that. Maybe this is all the point. Nick didn't get the luxury of a pleasant and happy world to find out who he was. He got a literal hellscape and scorched earth. I suppose he's like me in that way. I suppose he's like all of us. If we spend all our time asking who we would be if the tragedies in our lives had not unfolded, we will never make the time to discover who we are here and now. That is what we must contend with. How can we grieve our tragedies, survive our losses, and keep going, finding out who we are and who we want to be? That must be the next step. I would like to get unstuck. I would like to move forward. I need to start failing in a way that matters. I don't know what that means or how it will become true. It's time to cut myself free of the things that consume my brain against my will, to make room for art that is meaningful and good, to exist in a space where I can truly begin to unpack who I am and who I'd like to be, to live in a world that is just and good and safe. I don't know who I would be if the world were better. I can only ask who I am now as I continue looking for my place in the world, as it is for better or worse. I learned that from Nick, from Roy. I learned that from R.I.P.D. And now, hopefully, someone else can learn that too.